these reams of silks with metal threads going through them, the most beautiful cloth. And we stapled them onto the floors and onto the things and did big, huge paintings on them. And we cut them into frocks. So they walked up and down the runway in Paris, all my paintings made out of frocks, the most beautiful material. And then I made 1,000 handmade invites, all one by one by one. So that sort of started the whole process of getting into the art world and being recognised.
Yeah, one exhibition that really caught my attention was the Pills exhibition that you did in 1999. I actually found it quite hard to understand what it was all about.
That was because I just did a huge commission for the Morrison Hotel,
Right.
and that was through John Rocha, and that was the biggest ever private commission in Ireland at the time. So it was over 100 bedrooms, foyer pieces were maybe 25 by 25 foot, big, big paintings. It was very stressful and incredibly stressful. And then I hurt my neck. And somewhere between the two, I had this solo show coming up at the Kevin Kavanagh. And I just thought how ironic it was that you're not allowed to take drugs because they're illegal. Yet these were all the drugs that I was taking to make me feel better to get through the stage. So basically, all those pills were all the drugs that I took to get me through one stage of the commission, right to the end. They're so pretty looking.
Yes.
Like little sweets.
They did.
So there was like the contraceptive pill, there was Solpadeine, there were muscle relaxants. So if you actually look at them, they're done in their Latin names, so you wouldn't necessarily know what they were. But basically they were all the drugs that were prescribed legally to me to take during that period of time.
Clea, the Outsider exhibition, which you did in a monastery, did you live in the monastery alone for 3 months to do that exhibition?
I bought the monastery. It was my home.
No way.
Yeah. Beautiful. It was 5,000, 6,000 square foot. It had its own church. It was the most beautiful monastery. But it was in the middle of nowhere. Nobody wanted us there. It was a very small, close community. That's what that show was about. It's about the isolation, and also about being in such a heavy religious, the walls were breathing history. So that's what that show is about.
One painting that really caught my attention is the one, is it of Mary, with sort of, colours coming down on top of her. I felt that there was a depth of misery about her.
Oh, see, they were all based on the monastery, but they were also me. So I was using myself through them, and this conflict of interest of me not being baptized, not being Christian, not being Catholic, not being Protestant, not being anything. I just thought maybe all these religious characters are real people. Maybe they were people who cried, who laughed. They're not just a beautiful, still Madonna. Maybe she got a kick in the shins. Maybe she cried. Maybe her mascara ran. So that's what that was what that was about.
In 2008, Clea, your work changed, really, didn't it? With the Momentous exhibition, which sees your work go into a much darker period. Would I be right in saying that?
I feel that you carry some responsibility. It's not just about an aesthetic that you put up on a wall. There are places and times for that as well, but for me it's about translating a message, translating a feeling, maybe giving somebody else an opportunity to see something differently or something that's familiar, but it's putting something out there for somebody to create a narrative, a discussion, to understand something. And with Momentous, it started off with the death of my brother, but I wanted to do it through my mother's eyes so that I could be objective and pull back. Was that when he got sick, I just started filming him with my camera. I don't know why I asked him. He was very, very sick. He said yes. Then I had this show, and what I did was I wanted to show that there's a public face to death and there's a private face to death. So I had these photographs made from my mother's house. So in the living room downstairs, I took a photograph of the fireplace and all the flowers and the photograph of my brother. So it's exactly as is. It was the public face of her grieving. And that was at one end of the gallery. But at the other end of the gallery, also life-size, was the fireplace from her bedroom. And it had all the eclectic photos, the true story. Nothing was on display. And so they were polar opposites. But they're both saying a story, which one's true, which one's not. And then in between those, I had a very, very severely edited film. So I created 10 stills from the film, him in the coffin, and then from that point on, there was my mother in the garden cutting all these beautiful wildflowers. And then when you're cremated in Ireland, the ashes are put into green, ugly plastic thing. So she poured the ashes into an urn that was my brother's, and then we brought that urn down to Sandy Cove, and we went out in a boat with the family, and we put it out to sea. But then at the end of the series, there's a normal table set for dinner. But the only weird thing about it is there's cling film on it. And we'd never put cling film and stuff, but my mother had set it up, so when we came back after putting the ashes out, we'd all sit down. And because some of the children, my children and other people in the family, were so small, they didn't realise anybody had died. So they're putting on masks and laughing and eating pasta. And so it's like a big, huge Italian wedding. So I wanted just to capture just the normality, just in essence, a snippet. But from that point on, I felt I had a huge responsibility to give something back to the hospice because they were amazing. So I started residency in the Northwest Hospice in Sligo with a few other artists. And then I tried to understand about death, and I've been working pretty much on death since then.
But going through the death of somebody so close, it does change you, obviously. And even in your next exhibition, which is The Chance, that I felt that was more about pain, really, than death.
Yeah, that was a transition, I think. There's a lovely little book called The Prince. Do you know The Prince? Mm. There's this little fellow who's standing on top of a world. And he's just standing there. And is he happy? Is he sad? But it's just the isolation. So that exhibition was very much about not loss, but just floating. Mm. Trying to ground, but not quite there. And then there's also part of that was some of the beautiful landscape of Ben Bulben as a backdrop. I suppose that was the context of, because it was done here.
I did think it sort of came across a bit, in that exhibition, but it was beautiful. And then we get to really the piece de resistance, because this is also different. Your ambivalence show.
Yes.
Also known as Conflict.
That's right.
Which we have to start with the locusts. An amazing piece of work. So
thank you.
First of all, where did you get the idea?
I was living in Italy nearly 2 years ago, in the middle of nowhere, in a place called San Severino. And I went over there to put my kids into a local school. That they spoke no Italian, the school spoke no English. And we drove over from Ireland in the car, and I set up a studio. And as one does, I sit there and go, what am I doing here other than eating nice food and drinking wine? Get going, girl. And then somebody died that was very close to me. And I didn't know how to process that, because I was in Italy, and this was all happening in Ireland. It was actually my ex-husband. So I was going, how do I do this? And the thing about being in a warm country is there's this incredible noise that cicadas make. You know that? And you don't have it in cold countries, but as soon as you get off a plane or you're somewhere warm and you hear that noise, there's a bit of a So I wanted to make a piece that was somewhat about traveling, about heat, about warmth. But the idea of a locust is, locusts are incredible creatures. They are destructive, but they fly en masse. But they don't know where they're going. It's the wind that brings them. And then when the wind changes, they can or cannot stop, or they just go down and they cause mass destruction. And the locusts, in a way, were a metaphor for my relationship. As in, locusts, you don't know if something's going to happen or not happen. You've got absolutely no control. And then the idea of it being called silent noise was that when something really big happens, outside there's this calm and tranquility, everything's going on, but inside your head is going, so I decided I was going to make the piece, and I wanted to have the cicadas, but the cicadas are very, very small, and it would have been too difficult to make. So locusts are of the same family, and obviously the same metaphor. I was making all these paper balls of Italy because, back to the death, a circle around is complete. There's no start, there's no finish. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. I was made loads and loads of paper balls in Italy. So then I sort of meticulously started to do the locusts on one by one by one. And that's how Silent Noise was made.
So one piece that you showed in your conflict show that was shown in Ballina is the box of frogs, which we use a lot as an expression here for mental health. What was the history of that? How did you come up with that idea?
The box of frogs is a beautiful old Victorian box made up of 5 taxidermy frogs. So it's called 5 Frogs in a Victorian Box. But it's based on this Irish expression called mad as a box of frogs, which really is a whimsical term of saying that you're mad. But I was beginning to become aware of the fact that once somebody had called me mad as a box of frogs, it's a label. And do you carry that label then with you for your whole life, whether it's true or not? Or if someone's to call you fat or a drunk? And how easy it is for one to throw remarks at people and not be responsible for the consequences. And I just wanted to highlight that perhaps labelling isn't such a great idea, and in this case it was mad as a box of frogs.
Clea, you're doing a lot of work with the Northwest Hospice, but interestingly enough you're not teaching there. What exactly are you doing with them?
The point is that we don't have to do anything because we think differently and we are chosen as artists, that we sit and we talk and we chat and we engage, and hopefully we make the people in hospice feel better, and we extract things from them they haven't shared, stories, poems, songs. Sometimes we're even dancing with them, laughing with them. But it's just about being there and not as a doctor or a nurse or a consultant. And that's why I'm still working on death, because you can't carry all that inside you. So that's how things like my death mask that I made, through research, realised the only people who have death masks made would be clergy, poets, politicians, people of great reverence and of great respect. And I thought, what makes them more interesting or important than your neighbour or me or you or somebody? And then I was thinking, why do we celebrate people when they're dead? Why don't we celebrate them when they're alive?
Well, I think that's a very good point, actually. I think that one of the things that I think that's changing in Ireland is that people are becoming more aware of the fact that it might be nicer to go and visit somebody when they're very ill than to turn up at their funeral. But you're going to Mexico, so this is going to be a new stage, and you'll enjoy that. And what are you planning on doing in Mexico?
I'm going over because they have this incredible festival there called Day of the Dead, where on the 2nd of November they celebrate the souls of their loved ones, because they believe that they're not, when someone dies, they're not gone, they're just hanging around. So it's not a peasant tradition and it's not a sophisticated tradition, it's everybody's involved in it. So for a whole week, all the graveyards are decorated, special foods are made, the favourite foods, the favourite drinks, the favourite clothes, and the children get skeletons and they all dance with skeletons on the street, and they sit around the graveyards and they have picnics and they cheer and embrace death. So in Mexico, death walks hand in hand with life, but here we still separate the two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an exhibition about the disparities of the two cultures through my experiences of death in Ireland and death in Mexico, and that will culminate in an exhibition that will be shown in Mexico City and then also in Dublin.